Thank you so much for having me with y'all today. It's a pleasure to share this ongoing research that we've been doing in partnership with y'all there at Miles. So this is our 35th wave that we just released a couple hours ago for those of y'all that are on our email distribution. So we have been doing this study for 13 months now in partnership with Chris and the Miles partnership team. So thank y'all so much for working with us on this wonderful gift to the industry. So we go into field every other week, speaking to 1,000 adults who are travelers here in the United States, talking to them about their sentiment as it pertains to travel and opening up their communities to visitors. So this data that we're going to look at today was released actually a couple hours ago, as I mentioned, but it was actually collected starting midweek last week, and we came out of field on Monday. So if I had to give a theme for this week, what I would say is this is pandemic highs. We started noticing back in mid-February and then really starting in March, a trend towards upward mobility with all of our sentiment indicators. And we see a lot of these indicators that we'll go through today continuing this upward trend, but also a lot of them seeing a high compared to what we saw for those pre-pandemic levels. And so when I say pre-pandemic, we're looking at the study that we released March 11th of last year. So we continue to see for the third straight wave in a row that 87% of American travelers have travel plans within the next 6 months. Again, this is on par with the high that we saw right before the pandemic. And so, as we all know, when we talk about 6 months, this obviously is encompassing the very end of spring here. It's also covering that summer travel season and a little bit into fall. But as we know that we are all starting to make those plans and dreams of the warmer months and getting out for the summer, we wanted to start asking these American travelers what they plan to participate in on those summer trips. And when we look at this, we see that 5 of the top 6 activities are dominated by outdoor activities. So going to relax at an ocean, lake, or river. So going to a state or national park, going on a hike or a bicycle ride. So while we saw in 2020, so at the peak of the pandemic, people were going outdoors, this seems to be a trend that we're going to continue to expect to go on as we look into those summer months. And so we've been asking since the start of the pandemic, the factors that impact their decisions to travel in the next 6 months. So we focus primarily on the coronavirus, concerns about financial situations and transportation costs. As we all know, whenever making travel related decisions, there are a lot of factors that influence them. And these are the ones that we have asked about throughout the pandemic as they are a little bit unique for this current time. And when we ask those that would say that the coronavirus greatly impacted their decision to travel in the next 6 months, we see that this has dropped to 35%. Again, it's a low, but it's very positive and it's back to that pre-pandemic level. And so when we asked about the personal financial situation, we've seen this remain well at or a little bit below about 25%. Now we're down to 18%. And we have continued to see this decline over the last 3 waves. And you'll notice that whenever I look and I talk about the data, I'm going to say 3 waves. 1 data point is something to note. 2, we're looking at a trend. 3 means we have a trend. So we are seeing that concerns about the personal financial situation is actually starting to trend downward. So we ask them in terms of their impact on travel plans, the percent of travelers that are planning to actually change their plans due to coronavirus. And we're seeing that this is declining down to 56%. And this has stayed right around this data point for about a month now. And so for those that said that, yes, COVID-19 is going to impact their travel plans in the next 6 months, we asked them, what does that change look like? So what does change mean as we start to move through the pandemic? 23% of people actually say that COVID-19 is not impacting their travel plans. Mostly we see that people are reducing the number of trips that they're taking. They're choosing to drive versus fly. We've seen this hover around this 1/3 mark throughout the pandemic, and we're continuing to see that. And we're seeing that also about 30% are choosing to stay within the US as opposed to going internationally. And of course, given limitations of being able to leave and enter back into the country, this is not surprising at all. Now, only 12% say that they are choosing not to travel, and 8% are saying that they're actually canceling some travel plans. So well down from what we were seeing at the peak of the pandemic. So perceptions of safety in travel are something that are really important for us when we have been looking at decisions to travel during the pandemic and the impact of COVID-19 on travel sentiment. But specifically, when we look at perceptions of safety in travel, we've started to see significant improvement and seeing trends within that. So when we ask American travelers, do you support opening up their communities to visitors? We see that we are at a pandemic high at 55% of Americans saying that they support opening up their community. Now, this is very important because when you ask people about a factor that goes into destination selection, we see over and again that it's friendliness of the local community. And so having a community that supports opening up and is welcoming to visitors is very important when we talk about actually having those travelers come into our destinations. So we asked, how would you feel safe traveling outside their community? Again, 3 data points makes a trend, and we see that this is officially trending upward. So not only are we seeing pre-pandemic people that have plans to travel in the next 6 months, we're seeing this actually coupled with the fact that right now nearly 60% of American travelers actually feel safe getting out of their community and going on trips. And so when you take these two factors in together, this is very strong when we talk about sentiment towards travel. So we also have seen significant trending in a positive direction for perceptions of safety about dining in local restaurants and shopping in local retail stores. We're seeing that this has trended up to 61%. Again, a positive trend, but also a pandemic high. So we started to realize right about the time when the vaccine rollout began that this was going to be such an important component of travel decision making and planning. And so starting back in February, we started asking about the vaccine. And I want to highlight this week's data that's very, very important here. So we asked about the impact of the COVID-19 vaccine on travel plans, and we see that 2/3 of Americans, travelers, say that the vaccine is going to impact their plans to travel. About 1/3 of those that say that it's going to impact their plans say that they won't travel till they receive the vaccine. And what's very interesting when we start to look down here is that we see that it actually is not just a personal vaccine impact, but it's the vaccination of not only the communities that we live in. So saying that I will wait to travel until the majority of my community is vaccinated is about 17%, but then also people care about vaccination and the destination of interest, and that's about 20% of people. And so when we talk about the impact of the vaccine and vaccination on decisions to travel, it really is a little bit of a multivariate conversation. So when we look at the trending of waiting to travel until they receive the vaccine or saying the vaccine has no impact on travel plans, this has remained relatively stable since February when the plans for the vaccine rollout became more formalized and we kind of knew what that was going to look like. So it's been interesting to see a lot of stability around this. So we're still seeing about 1/3 of American travelers that are wanting to wait or that are saying, hey, it's not impacting my decision to travel. So a month ago, we asked about plans to get vaccinated. And so we know that the vaccine is a key ingredient for getting American travelers out on the roads and in airplanes and in our destinations. And so we wanted to ask them, what do those vaccine plans look like? And some very interesting data started to emerge this past week. So back in March, when we asked, have you been fully vaccinated? We saw that that was actually 18 percentage points below where it is today. So 42% of American travelers have been fully vaccinated. Another 15% have been partially vaccinated, and another 15% plan to be fully vaccinated by the end of May. So what's really interesting here when we take a look at this is that we see that the vaccination rates of American travelers are actually almost twice that of the American population at large. So we're seeing some very important trends here, and we're seeing actual trends, not just data points that show positivity and sentiment. We're seeing true growth in sentiment. It's that people with travel plans for the next 6 months is staying stable at pandemic highs. Perceptions of health and safety, specifically when it comes to your own community and moving about and welcoming visitors in, is starting to trend upward past those pandemic highs. And while we see that 2/3 of Americans feel that the vaccine or American travelers is going to impact their decision to travel, we actually see that these American travelers are out and they're getting vaccinated. And so they're really doing what they feel they need to do to get out on the road again and travel. And we're seeing that this rate is clipping about a little bit above that than the US overall. So again, we're seeing all the positive indicators moving in the direction that we need them to be. And so this was a very positive week when we talk about looking at travel sentiment.